Hey gals and guys, it's your host Phil Larson, and this is your motivational high five on Loss. Let's do this. Welcome to the show. We are hearing from a longtime fan and supporter of the podcast, Robert Stark. And before we get to that, and before I start talking about Robert, because I got a lot of good things to say about him, I am going to give a shout out to Josh Mifflin, my buddy Josh, who has listened to the podcast for a while and has come on as a $5 a month sponsor through patreon.com/YMH5. He has access to my micro podcasts that are just short raw recordings as I go along in life, as I just record with my phone and upload them. But I give you instructions on how to actually get those to kick out to your individual podcast listener app. So it will come in just like any other podcast, and there are other rewards and reward levels. So check it out at patreon.com/YMH5. A couple other ways to support the podcast. If you are looking for kind of virtual counseling, BetterHelp.com has got you covered, and they are offering our listeners a bit of a discount. For first month, you get 10% off if you use the code BetterHelp.com/YMH5. That's help, HELP, BetterHelp.com/YMH5. I'm a big cheerleader for counseling, and so is Robert, that you're going to hear from today. It's been very important in both of our lives, and right now, as we are still keeping our distance from people, online counseling is a great option. BetterHelp.com/YMH5. The number 5. Use the number 5. Okay, and let's get going. Robert reached out to me on Instagram maybe a year ago now. And I feel like we've been in constant communication back and forth every once in a while since then. And I've got to really learn more about him and his heart, which is awesome. And I trust it so much that the Internal Motivators, our online community at internalmotivators.com, you can get to that. He is now a moderator of that. And so he's doing an incredible job engaging in conversation there. And I really trust him. So Robert gave me a really good bio. I'm just going to read. Here's a little bit about Robert. Robert is a gay man living in West Michigan. The survivor of traumatic suicide, he copes with major depression and post-traumatic stress disorder. While struggling with alcohol and drug abuse, he reached his rock bottom, resulting in an attempt which caused significant long-term damage to his body. Robert hopes his experiences can be used to help others feel less alone, but most importantly, he enjoys building human connection. For more information on suicide prevention, visit Robert's social media accounts under Amped Addict. That's AMPED Addict. Amped Addict. Try saying that 5 times fast. And then he adds this on the end. I love it. If you are struggling and need someone to talk to, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is available 24/7 at 1-800-273-8255. Robert has a mission in life now. So much meaning and so much purpose. And he wants you to reach out to him if you need to. So go ahead and do that. He's a great guy to talk to. So without further ado, here is Robert Stark.
Hello, fellow motivators. Today, I wanted to talk about loss. In my 33 years, I've suffered significant loss. Throughout my early 20s, I struggled with a great deal of depression and social anxiety. And through drinking and using drugs, I was able to find a way to numb out that pain momentarily, which eventually became extremely addictive. I ended up at a point where I was using substances on a daily basis just to get by. In my late 20s, I finally decided it was time to get help. So then began this rapid cycle of in and out of rehabs, trying to stay sober. Unfortunately, I was only ever to stay sober for a few days, sometimes maybe a few weeks, but eventually I'd always relapse and end up back in rehab. The guilt and shame was overwhelming, and the hiding and lying all the time was exhausting, and I just couldn't do it anymore. In late November, after months of lying about my sobriety, I ended up finding myself drunk and in a pill-induced haze at the river's edge on a cold late November night. The next thing I remember is waking up in the ICU a couple of weeks later, unable to move my body with no recollection of what had happened. A couple of college kids found me at the river's edge and called 911. The river had apparently pushed me back up onto the riverbank, preventing me from drowning. Unfortunately, the water was so cold, and as a result, my right leg had to be amputated. That was devastating, and it was a long 3-month recovery. My life was forever changed, and I was so angry. I was bitter and angry. It took me a long time to accept that loss. I was stuck in it for a really, really long time, and I didn't think I would ever come to terms with it. What I've learned, though, is that in order to truly heal, you have to find meaning in that loss. Maybe I'd still be struggling with my addiction if this wouldn't have happened. I still do question a lot of times why I survived the odds and wondering what I'm supposed to do with this life now. But loss comes in many forms. I lost many years of my life to my addiction, and I recently actually lost my job of 12 years as a result of COVID. One of my favorite authors, David Kessler, says everyone's loss is the most important loss. And I believe that's true. We shouldn't be comparing our losses to one another. Everyone's loss is important. And it doesn't matter what type of loss it is. Loss hurts, and loss takes time to heal. But in order to heal, you have to find meaning. You have to. It's the key.
As I had mentioned up top, Robert has a mission. Thanks for that. I love it. It's like he's really gone through some stuff. And to come out of it wanting to expand his story by inviting others into it brings him meaning. Brings him meaning and purpose, and friends, that's what we have to do. That's what we have to do. There's no question that you haven't gone through something big. To allow that to push you to expand on the meaning of your life is the redemption of pain. It's the way of not wasting pain. Viktor Frankl, you may have heard of him. He's a neurologist and a psychiatrist and a Holocaust survivor. He's a author of 39 books, including the most well-known, Man's Search for Meaning, based on his experiences in various Nazi concentration camps. You talk about someone who's experienced suffering. You talk about someone who's experienced loss. And one of his known quotes is, "In some ways, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning, such as the meaning of a sacrifice." And what did Frankl do with his loss? Frankl was the founder of logotherapy. Literally, it means healing through meaning. It's a meaning-centered school of psychotherapy. Guys, if you reach out to Robert, and if you reach out to anyone who's gone through some sort of struggle, and they've become honest with it, they find themselves on the other side of experiencing loss. And dealing with loss is an ongoing thing. It will come back to you. You know, there's parts of what Robert lost in his accident that he will off and on come back to missing and grieving. A good episode that this episode will pair with is episode 64 on grief. And as I say there, and I'll say here, the only way out is through. If you've experienced loss in your life, the only way out is through. And sometimes that is really a rough thing to hear, especially when you're in the middle of it and you're in the lowest of low. And in a point in my life where I did experience a pretty big loss for me, at that point in my life, someone said to me, and it was a church-related loss, and this person went to my church. He said, "God wastes no pain." And of course, in the moment, I was like, well, thanks, I guess. But on the other side of it, on the other side of loss, as Robert talks about, there's meaning. There's so much meaning. There's so much in hindsight that you see as reason for you going through the depths. And as you will find on the other side that you went through the depths, and as you were going through the depths, you were gaining muscle. There were things that you were gaining there. You were gaining perseverance. You were going through character development of yourself. And as you come through loss, much like a birth, a new birth, much like a transformation, much like a metamorphosis, a caterpillar going through a cocoon, a very dark and tight space, and coming out with wings. It's the same being, it's the same thing, but it looks different, and now it can fly. My friends, when you reach the other side, when you open yourself up and stretch yourself out from your loss, the meaning you find is the wings for you to fly. The commercials are wrong. Red Bull doesn't give you wings. No, loss does. Have I sold you on it yet? You can make it. You can make it. But keep going. That's a common mantra of this podcast. Keep going. You got this. You're not alone. Friends, as we end the episode, as we always end the episode, we find a reflection of ourselves and we look at us. We look at ourselves. Maybe we see the old person before the loss, the person who didn't know. Oh, you have a lot to learn. Maybe you see the person going through the loss, and you can have grace and compassion on that person there. Hey, it's okay. Hang in there. You got this. Maybe you see the person who's been transformed, the person who has wings. It's you. Friends, if you're not there yet, know that one day you will see a future you through reflection with wings. Okay, really pushing that metaphor. So please, find a reflection of yourself. We do this, we say a positive thing, we allow a positive narrative to enter our lives as a way of rewiring our brains, as supported by neuroplasticity. It's an act of faith, but because we can't see our brains, we got to trust the science that says that we can change paths. We can change the neural paths of the energy and stories that are being told and pushed through our brain. We can create new paths. We can strengthen those paths by reinforcing with positive stories over and over again. That takes time. So we do it one step at a time. And this is episode 108. So you have 107 other opportunities to do this. This is how this podcast works. So over time, as we join each other in this act of faith of rewiring our brain, of introducing positive narratives into our lives, we grow. We begin to change. We begin to transform. We experience metamorphosis in different parts of our lives. So when you find a reflection of yourself, we say this to yourself: I can accept loss as a powerful part of my story and helpful to my search for meaning. If you're looking for a shortcut, again, friends, the only way out is through. There's no shortcuts to loss. There's no shortcuts to metamorphosis. There's no shortcuts to certain growth. You just need to go through it, is the reality of it. If you find yourself in a suicidal place, call 1-800-273-8255. We're not meant to do this life alone. People want to help. They're just waiting for you to reach out. It starts with you.